right. All right. So we are waiting for Meredith to come on. For those of you that didn't see the post, um, we are going to be talking about trauma. So I think she actually had a question box up and had some questions. So we will start with those and kind of see where that leads us. See, someone asked if I had internet. Yes, I actually did. They were finally able to get Wi-Fi installed. It was a complete nightmare. I mean, they had to run the cable and the construction and all that, which I assumed, but I'm not relying on phone hotspots and library hotspots right now. Thank God. Let's see. All right, we invited Meredith. See if she's able to join. If not, I don't know if she's listening or not, but you can send me a request. There she is.
Hello.
We're good. We got it.
How are you?
I am doing good. How are you?
I'm good. Well, you're the one who's in prep, so.
Yep. It's business as usual. I like being busy though, because it keeps my mind off of myself. Essentially, I mean, that's the cliff notes. It's like I don't have time to think about anything else. You know?
Fair enough. Fair
So,
enough. I can totally
yeah.
understand.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine not being busy anyhow, but let alone like right now.
No, yeah, when you're dieting or anything intense like that, like having your mind occupied is, I feel like that's when
Yep.
everybody thrives the most. And that's when people dive into like even more work projects and things like that. I was actually talking to somebody and who's also in prep, and he was saying his lowest day, like where his energy actually tanks, is when he's only working. He's not like working and going, has a training day, like and constantly being on the go doing things. It's
Right.
like when you're just stationary doing one
Yeah.
thing, you just kind of get more exhausted because your mind's not like,
Yeah.
oh, gotta go here, 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 here.
Yeah. Yeah. You definitely gotta break it up into some different chunks and segments and stuff. But you know, these are not foreign feelings. I've done this quite a few times. So,
Just a few things. Yeah, just a few times.
so we're all good. But um didn't you put a question box up?
I
Did you
did.
get anything?
Well, I did.
Okay.
And zero of it is related to this. I
Oh,
got asked
all right.
what did I get? What my middle name is. Have I ever been in detention? Was one of my questions. Um,
Lots of times.
yeah, exactly right. So nothing of
That's funny.
substance, I will say. No offense if any of you ask those questions. I'm really sorry.
That's all right. No biggie. I did announce the topic, but we're getting some more people rolling in now. So um, we had planned on going into the topic of trauma and relating it to our genre of clients, if you
Mhm.
will. Um, I mean, it ties into all genres, Gen Pop, contest prep, anyone. Um, we don't know exactly how deep down this rabbit hole we are going to go, but we will we will talk and see what happens. So, for those of you that follow me and maybe not Meredith, or vice versa, Meredith, you handle almost exclusively functional health at this point, for the most part, right?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Yes.
Do you have do you have many like Gen Pop weight loss type clients, or do they all have a functional health component to them?
It's interesting. Most everybody came to me originally with a functional health component. However, a good thing is I can now say I have healthy clientele
Passed it.
yeah, that surpassed
That's
that,
the goal.
that has stayed with me after we've gotten things resolved. And, even respectfully with this topic, during that, like once we got that immediate quote, I'll call it immediate issue resolved, and they're now in a better situation where, they're feeling good, strength in the gym, we're actually able to pinpoint those situations that may have been triggers to what they originally came to me for, but now
Sure.
actually work through them. So when you have like the clients that are like, I have this going on with work, my relationship is suffering, divorce, moving, I'm now sole custody of all my kids, I'm able to say, hey, we are here. This is the moment that we do not want to go down this rabbit hole again. So let's navigate and control what we can control. And this is also where that client may be a little bit more hyper aware of, hey, I'm getting tired at this point in day, or starting to kind of go into symptoms. And this could be an opportunity where one, well, it's always, I say, this is awesome, you're recognizing it. But then two, I can also help educate them to, hey, why are we hungry? Why are we not sleeping? And then they say, oh yeah, and make that correlation. And so I think
Right.
that's a really cool spot that I do have now clientele that have surpassed, functional issues, and they're actually
Right.
working with their functional health
Yep.
for their future.
Yeah. Yeah. And I get a lot of that too, because I have a lot of competitor clients, but they were a competitor and now need fixed, or they need fixed so they can compete again, potentially. Depends on the person, right? Case to case basis. But yeah, I mean, I get a lot of that. So I
Which is
actually
a
did
conversation, right? That's a
yeah,
conversation that you have to have with somebody, with especially the competitors that come in, or regardless of competition, like even physique goals, extreme physique goals, where
yeah,
depending on where the client is, we have to have a very real heart to heart, which that real heart to heart may need to be taken in layers and steps, because they may not even be ready to receive the full
right.
outcome of the information that we need to say, hey, listen, this may not be in your best interest in the future. That might be something that as a coaches, I know you and me are really in tune with that, where we work to prepare the client to receive that information.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean so I literally did a podcast a few hours ago, and that was almost exclusively what the podcast was about like um when you're intaking. So I like to use examples, right? So my example was essentially like, let's pretend I'm intaking a new client. The things that I'm considering, which of course I went into environment and all these things, but considering like what is even a sustainable, you know, realistic goal for these people, because generally people base that on one of two things. It's either A, something they saw online, which probably has almost no relevancy, or B, what they maybe used to look like. And what they maybe used to look like is maybe why they look like they do now. So it's kind
Yeah.
of like, well, what you used to look like is partially why you're here.
Why you're
So
here.
that's not a good basis either. But, one of the other things I was talking about was trauma, and and trauma, like I talked about it in like a really broad sense. I lumped in like disordered eating, lumped in like actual childhood traumas and adult traumas, whether that be physical, whether that be psychological, relationships, sexual, like whatever it might be. But considering that in how you deliver the information to the client, and also considering that in how small of a bite or bites you may need to take when you're approaching this. Because one of the examples I used was, maybe we know that this is what the starting point should be, but if I put them there, even though that looks optimal on paper, it's not going to work. I may need to put them here and inch my way over to here.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit. I'd say let's start with common common types of trauma that probably play into body composition the most?
Man.
What do you think? I mean, I can think of a few that probably play into. I mean, it's huge topic, but
I just have such a broad clientele, as you know, with
yeah.
regard to this. So yeah, give me a couple examples of where you want to go with this. And
Okay, so I would say I see, I mean, all over the board. And honestly, there's probably people that I have that haven't even fully told me everything yet because I slowly am like unlocking things as we go. Um, those are always some aha moments, but anyhow, they body image. So we can talk about body image first because a lot of the deleterious behaviors that we have in this population are based on body image. So whether their goal is unrealistic or maybe they do already look good, but they don't think they look good type of thing. Uh, so what kind of trauma can that stem from? One that I see, especially in the female crowd, because males definitely suffer from body image issues, 100%. But in the female crowd is expectations with, growing up in childhood and relatives, friends, relationships, those people that are close to them driving those expectations higher. So that's a really broad one, but somebody constantly, telling you something, shaming you, whatever it might be. And then and sometimes those things are so subtle too. It's not like you had a parent that constantly berated you, but you had enough little inputs over time that it programmed you, right?
Yeah.
So now in your 30s or in your 40s, that's your automatic response, whether unconsciously you associate with that.
I think that, and we've talked about this before, especially with regards to females. We have to also look at like what's going on with society and what's popular, or what is perceived that will bring you happiness. And this goes into like, used to be magazines, but now it's social media and it's all over. Like it's in an instant, we can see pictures of people that look so happy or look that like they're having the sex of their life. And we associate it with how their body looks, with this confidence. And so I'm 100% in agreement with, it can be just small things starting from when somebody was in high school, and something that somebody just said to you one time is enough that just triggers this kind of like cascade of things that you are going to start telling yourself and thus believing, or could send you into a position where if someone said something to you triggering, like say in high school, and then you're like, hey, well, I'm going to try this, whether you knew what you were trying or not, and you started eating less, right? Because that's all
Perfect.
right? Yeah.
Perfect example.
So I'm gonna start I'm gonna just eat less, because I did this. I ate less, and then all of a sudden my body changed, and I got some positive feedback from that.
Sure.
So
Perfect.
I ate less, and then I played a game, with how little I could eat on my plate, and it's just this game just gets propagated. So it's almost like people love that competition and going to win a competition. Well, it kind of becomes for many people this internal competition, and that's how you can just start this tumbleweed of positive reinforcement of a habit that could be detrimental long term.
Right. Well, competing is a perfect example of this, because especially again in the female crowd, how many people compete because for one, they like the way that these women look. Maybe they have friends that do it, whatever. But it's because it's the next step in their cycle, right?
Yeah, exactly.
This cycle that they're already in, that maybe they think maybe is perceived as healthy, and maybe at the time it is. Like maybe there's healthy habits going on, but what they don't realize is whatever triggered them initially is slowly but surely spiraling out of control. They're slowly but surely losing control, right?
Yeah.
And then by the time they get to us, it's they're in a position where obviously the damage has been done. I mean, it's not often that we get a client that's like a quick in and out type of thing. I mean, it's a miracle if you do, but for the most part, they're at a point where physically, here, what generally has to happen, unfortunately, is they have to be so downregulated physically that they can't continue doing what they wanted to do. So now they have to acknowledge it,
Yeah,
right?
it's the whole thing is once, especially when it comes to diet and trauma from under eating, right? The trauma on your body. Well, it's going to end up becoming a psychological thing eventually, because we're talking about micronutrients that your body's not getting, and then functions of your body are going to start down regulating. So it's the same old tale we always hear with under eating, where anxiety starts triggering up, we start getting emotional. And many people have never really, they don't know that they've actually experienced what it feels like to be in it versus out of it. I feel like somebody who has like a really, really great relationship with food, who perhaps has done a prep and has done a true off season, they understand what maintenance is, they understand what it's like to feel the energy of being at maintenance, the strength of being at maintenance versus the extreme of, say, the very end of a contest prep. Well, that's where a lot of the population lives.
Right.
And people don't understand that. But truly, when a lot of clients are coming to me, their intuitive eating, their intuition from what they have intuitively been taught from childhood on, they're now eating like 700, 800, 900 calories intuitively. And,
Right.
I get people are like calories in versus calories out. And I'm like, until you really start talking to people and seeing what's really happening, like we're dealing with clients that they have families and jobs, and they literally will put themselves so far on the back burner. They have fallen behind the stove. They have no energy. They're not sleeping, but yet it is a struggle to get them to put themselves first, because it has been ingrained in their DNA that it is wrong. It is wrong for them to make time to eat. It is wrong you don't deserve it, for whatever reason.
Right. We talked about this on, I think, our last call. So-and-so has a young child, right? Well, they occupy a lot of my time. Like, well, my client Sally also has 2 young children that occupy a lot of her time. And I hate to compare people in that way, but the point is that Sally prioritizes things a little bit differently. But what people don't realize too is that by Sally feeling better, she's able to take better care of her children and be a better member of her family and be more present and be less detached and, all these things. The prep thing is a great example. So I've done this. I've prepped and had off seasons and done it. And I've early on, like my mindset now is totally, oh my gosh, vastly different. It's vastly different. In fact, I'm going to make a post after, the shows are over and stuff, and talk about why I'm going to gain fat back as quick as possible. And I'm going to like drive this home, like not get fat, but just talk about like what this post contest process looks like for me now versus 10 years ago. Yeah. Right. And unfortunately, to your point, that a lot of people, and you and I have had some really, really, really extreme cases where people are almost like can't get off the couch type of thing, where they're just almost bedridden. Yeah. And that is what it took for that person to finally acknowledge and finally, come to terms with what was going on. And of course, by that point, there's so much damage done that we're talking about turmoil psychologically.
Yeah. I think it's just a lot of it's normalized.
Sure.
I think a great example is a new mom. So it is normalized, and understandably so, that any parent out there's going to be a level of exhaustion. Let's be real. Like, you are game freaking on 24 hours a day, one eye open. That being said, I have quite now, because I have some clients that were on the other side of it, where they are a single parent of multiple children, but yet they're like, my number one goal is showing up for me, making sure I eat my food, my water. I feel my best when I do this. And they have been on the opposite side, and they were almost encouraged and normalized to, oh, you know, you're supposed to feel like shit. You're supposed to feel dizzy, you know, like who has time, you know, to eat, and like, and that's what makes it so frustrating, I think, is it is normalized and almost a badge of honor for
That's the
some
word. That's the
people.
term.
It's a
Yep.
badge of honor for how hard, I don't know, how low you can go.
I've been
You
there.
know,
I've been there.
yeah, the only I have two. Okay, right. So this is like the pot calling the kettle black, but like we can't,
Yeah.
like, honestly, truly, because I've been there, and I got the T-shirt, and it sucked. That was a shitty T-shirt.
Yeah. I don't wear that t-shirt anymore.
No, I don't want to wear that T-shirt again. But there was that badge of honor about, I can get up at, 3:30 in the morning. I'm doing my cardio at 4. I was at my job, like, and I did that, 4 hours of sleep, and it got me in a horrendous place,
So
but a lot of people get praised for that.
yeah, I mean, it's easy to see. I mean, it's extremely normalized. You go on any social media, talk about it's people joke about it, right? It's a joke, but really they're miserable in reality. Um, so I can share a little too, and maybe you can as well. What drove you? What kind of trauma or sequence of events drove you to go through what you went through in terms of health? And I can share on my end as well, because I've talked to, and you have too, talked about like what actually happened, but I don't know that I've ever talked so much about why what would possess someone to, you know, do that to themselves type
Yeah.
of thing.
Um, for me, I do think I'm a very driven person. And at the time, I wanted to be my absolute best, as an athlete. That being said, working my daily job, being my best and being the best athlete I could, was undergoing some health things outside of my control. My ovaries were twisting on the regular. I was being put into the hospital, having, an ambulance show up at my house almost once a month. And having that, and then undergoing multiple surgeries, and then ultimately losing my mom in a very tragic way. All of a sudden, during all of that time, my body just was like, hey girl, that's it. We're good. We're done adapting. We're done working hard here. We need a second to catch up. And it was a level of exhaustion that I wouldn't want on anybody. I was 100% at my rock bottom as far as like depression, everything. It was that moment of not, I actually had that moment of not knowing that I wanted to live, but not knowing how. And that is something that I never wish on anybody ever. And it was kind of like that coming to Jesus moment where I said, hey, I need to start changing some things. I need to really start looking at, if I want to pursue coaching, if I want to be the coach that I say I want to be, I need to start looking after myself in the most profound way ever. And that also led me to do a lot of education about what was happening with my body as far as hormones go, right? Like that was during all of this is when, I had my first ovary removed. Well, that changes things.
Sure.
As much as the doctor will say, oh, the other one just picks up where the other one left off, like,
Mhm.
oh God. not the case. So for me, when we talk about like, trauma, I have to be very thoughtful to the fact that I did go through some pretty intense experiences, and my body let me know that it was ready for me just to take some moments to gather myself. And even now, I am somebody that resorts to, I would say, a little bit more low cortisol than some people always have issues with high cortisol. Yeah, I know. They're
I
very similar on this. So that's something I have to be really thoughtful about, with regard to how I'm managing my stress and having boundaries. So
yeah. Yeah, so you had your route or your path had some things that were self-inflicted, but also some things that were out of your control or predisposition, a lot. There's a lot that went into it. So I've thought about this so many times because for the longest time, I had depression issues really young age. I was put on medication, the whole nine, 7 or 8 years old, put on psych meds,
wow.
SSRIs, things like that, which looking back, it seems asinine to me now. But
Yeah.
I was always so confused about it because me and my family, we have a good relationship. We're not like up each other's butt all the time or anything, but everyone's on good terms. We have no issues really. We had ups and downs like anyone, right? Um, Never had a lot of money when I was little, but we did a little bit better as I got older. By the time I was, middle school, high school, like never had any issues. So to me, I couldn't ever figure out why. You know what I mean? Like what happened? Like why nothing happened. And then I thought more about it, and it was less a case of like an environmental thing in that sense, but more a case of I was from a young age, I had a hard time relating to people, which I don't know if, personality, sense of humor, intelligence, like whatever it was, I just didn't relate good with people. I was way too witty for my own good and got myself in a lot of trouble, whatever, right? And body image issues started around puberty, which, I had the typical male chubby fat phase, right? Like a lot of kids have. And I worked my way through that. What I did notice a trend over all the years though is that my family, business owners, people that I was around, a lot of hardworking people, I was praised. I noticed I got praised for working hard. And the harder I
Yeah.
worked, the more I got praised.
Yes.
Even though on the back end, I was hurting sometimes because I'm like trying to maintain this status quo or above status quo. And then, when I look back, the praise was not ill-willed, but the praise was not, they were not in tune with what they were praising, is
Yeah.
my point. The people that were praising were not very in tune with what was actually going on with me. Right. So I eventually got to the point where I didn't need the praise anymore. I wasn't doing it for the praise. The cycle had already started. Right.
Yeah.
So it became a point where once I actually, of course, went from wrestling, which was again, very, very unforgiving sport. It's pretty, you have a team, but it's very individual, super unforgiving sport. And then into bodybuilding, which is one of the most unforgiving sports in terms of you could train really hard and still lose and all of these things, right? It's like not
Yeah.
forgiving at all for what you get.
Yeah.
But I gravitated towards that at a really young age. My 18, I started my first contest prep at 18. And of course, that perfect fit for me, right? Because it just kept feeding that behavior. And then I got additional praise from like a new crowd of people because they're like, man, you're crazy, like how well or how much, how routine you are for such a young guy. And most people are out partying and blah, 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 and doing all this. And that was all fine and good until I didn't know anything about functional health at the time. And until I drove myself into the ground where I couldn't hardly walk up a flight of stairs by the time I was 21 years old. 21-year-old guy, you know what I mean? Would be nearly in tears by the time I get to the top of the stairs because I just was so fatigued. Like I couldn't even make it. You know, I just wanted to lay down halfway up. And so what really got me was there was a point where I was like, I could do anything. No one can outwork me. I can push through anything. Then I realized there was a point where this might beat me. Like, I don't know if I keep doing this, if I will be able to push through anymore. Physically, I literally cannot move, you know? So that was kind of my breaking point. And of course, depression was at all-time peak and all the things. Hormones were non-existent. I'm sure dopamine had left the chat, you know, several years prior.
Yeah.
So I fortunately and unfortunately, I got to experience a lot of that stuff at a young age, and I got to, you know, work through it, and I did come out on the other side. But there's been a lot of like evolutions along the way because I've had other things, you know, other issues along the way, and I've fallen back into those tendencies along the way. This prep's been really interesting because one of the things a goal I set for myself was, of course, win, right?
Yeah.
You know, look a certain way. But one of the goals I set for myself was more mindset because I know physically I'm going to do whatever I have to do to get there. And I know that it's temporary, and I understand, like, you know, preparation for prep and post prep and all this. So I'm confident in all that. But I set myself the goal of having mentally staying as level and normal and quote unquote normal as I possibly could. And I feel I've done better at it this time than I've ever done in any of the prior preps. Even though it's getting extremely hard now, you know, calorically and cardio and very lean and all these things. But I really aim to maintain the most normalcy that I can. But yeah, it did take me a really long time to figure out like what trauma I'd actually experienced. And once I figured it out, you know, I've had this discussion with my parents a couple of times. My dad was always super hard on me, and not in a negative way. It wasn't like he wasn't like physically abusive or anything along those lines, but there was a lot of there's definitely a lot of things looking back from like, man, that really started a trend of that probably could have been avoided, but luckily, you know, I figured it out eventually.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest testament is like taking those moments, just like kind of have, hopefully, of course I say this, but I had to have, you know, these rock bottom moments, right? To be able to step back. And I think I've told you before, like being calm is like such a superpower, but taking a step back and just assessing the situation. And I think that having gone through like what you've been through, you've done a lot of reflection, and I've done a lot of reflection, and also taken the time to look going forward, how we want things to go, and recognize when things are starting to perhaps slide, because they will slide. We are all human. But taking those opportunities to realize that. And that's what I see a lot of people want to fight. They really want, like you mentioned, to go back to the way they were before.
Right.
And that's where having those conversations of, hey, we don't want to go back, because going back to where you were, where your body looked, all those places, that was in a trajectory that got you to where you are right now. We want to learn the lessons from the past and perhaps create some boundaries in your present so that the future is looking a hell of a lot better than your past.
Right. And I don't know about you, but I didn't have anyone telling me any of this. Like I didn't have, you know what I mean? Like it's so different now because there are people like you and myself and coaches that are, I definitely wouldn't say all, I mean, we know that not all coaches are in tune in this way, and not all functional coaches are either, but there are some, and there are there's better access to this type of information. Whereas I didn't have any of that. It was just like trial by fire, you know. Um, and yeah, it was so easy to revert back to those habits
You're
because you know what it
comfortable.
is.
Yeah,
Well,
it's familiar.
really what my trauma was addiction.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
Really. Like if you want to put a term on it, it's being an addict to that, response and to that work.
Yeah.
Um and that's when, like, when I finally, because I had done therapy and some different instances, like different phases of my life. There was years in between and stuff. But when I was in my early 20s, I did like really the last round of probably pretty intensive therapy. And one therapist had told me that he's like, well, you have obsessive compulsive disorder, essentially. It's like, he's like, if you have a version of it, perfectionism, efficiency, like all these things. He's like, you're not cleaning off doorknobs. You know what I mean? It's not like that, but you're very much an addict in a way. He's like, you didn't resort to drugs or alcohol or whatever, but he goes, also your hardcore resistance to those things is also part of your addiction, part of your addictive personality, because you're the balance, there's no balance in that
Yeah.
way. Um, so that was like a defining moment for me when I finally realized, okay, this makes sense. Why this is what drives my depression and my anxiety and all these
Yeah.
things. But um, man, what a journey it has been. It's funny now looking back because we talk about these things and I get newer clients that haven't been in the space very long and stuff, and I talk to them about it. Every once in a while, I have to be like, listen, if it's happened, I've had it. Outside of a menstrual cycle, I've done it. Done every single one of them on the list. There's not one that I don't check, you
I
know.
teach you. I got the menstrual
And
cycle.
and he go, but I also had hypogonadism. So like I'm in there in a way. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay.
so it's difficult. That's another thing too, is like if we're talking about working with clients, being relatable, I think is important. It's difficult sometimes for people to be relatable, but also be nurturing and enough of an authority figure at the same time. Because you have to be, because you want to meet people in the middle, but you can't just submit to
Just meet them.
everything.
Can't just
Right.
meet. I gotta.
You,
I always say
yeah,
I'm gonna meet you where you're at, but we ain't staying there.
right.
This is
We're going to
not the
start.
place you stay.
Right. It's like we will start there, but that's where, we have those conversations, like that class that I did and stuff, and talking about like steps to bartering and ultimatum and these things. But of course, we try to start with that softer approach. But there inevitably there are cases that require some immediate intervention
Yeah.
right off the bat, that like this, maybe not so much that you have to change everything right now, but the conversation that you will have to change these things. These are all non-negotiables. Maybe it won't happen right this second, but in order for you to get where you want to be, there is no way, shape or form, protocol or otherwise, that's going to get you there without this and this changing.
I think that a good point you just made with regard to a protocol is also that conversation with the clients that are seeking for the protocol to fix them. And that also, I wish that a lot of people would perhaps have a bigger dialogue with clients that come in. And I know that's something that you do, it's something that I do, where I talk to clients. That's my job, to absolutely facilitate getting them from point A to Z and beyond. Once I get you to Z, let's start some new goals. That being said, we really start to have to look within, and that we can't rely on just taking XYZ supplement to fix you and change something profoundly if we're not changing our habits and our mindset, because otherwise we're literally just wrapping you up in band-aids and duct tape. And I think that that's a hard conversation to have with clients when we do see perhaps there is some trauma going on or has happened, and they really need to work through that. And that's where, like, I know you do, and I know myself, I say, hey, we need to bring in a mental health component here, because there are some things that have happened within your life, and rightly so, we need to start working through, because these are things that are going to affect your health. These are things your body is holding on to. You know, the female that, comes to you and has 7 rounds of IVF fail. Like, guys, let's talk about, what she has really been through. Like, not just the hormones for her body, but like mentally what she has gone through. The female we were talking about that had to make the decision to have a mastectomy. Let's take a second and think about what she really had to go through to make that decision, and make the referral if we need to, because that's some intense stuff that she's had to go through.
Right. Yeah, because we talked about this very recently too, about hang on one second. I gotta. Hey, I'm on the phone.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Whoever said fix the root cause, don't just chop off the limb. Absolutely.
Yeah, we're back. Okay. Yeah, because we had talked about this one recently, where you get this person that came in and something happened to them that was traumatic, and then in turn they developed this trauma cycle and they created a behavior, whatever it might be. So a lot of people, when they look at that, you're like, well, you basically copped out, you basically made the wrong decision, blah blah blah. But you didn't go through what they went through. That's the thing, is you can't just sit there and present it to someone that way when you don't really have that type of experience to, that you can relate to them. And sometimes we do. I think that's where you and I are unique, and some other coaches are unique that have had a lot of experiences, and not only had them, but actually resolved them. Like, there's plenty of coaches and functional coaches that have had them that are still in them and that have never come out on the other side. Okay, that's a different topic, but we won't go into that. But it's one thing to just tell someone like, oh, you developed this addiction or this exercise addiction or whatever, you're weak and this and that. You need to fix it. But you don't understand what that root cause and what that felt like and what that, created. So that's where we have kind of a cool insight, I think, and a lot of personal experiences that we can use and, reflect onto our clients.
Yeah, even like what you just said with regard to training. When a client comes to us and yes, they're overtraining. Yes, they're, maybe a cardio bunny or Sally, whatever. They're doing, 2 hours of cardio a day. They're training 7 days a week. Just yanking that out from underneath them may be what they need, but is it really what they need right now in this very step one? Probably not. Maybe we need to get there eventually, or maybe not. Maybe we can, wean things down by educating them, talking to them, and then just doing that, we may get enough yield to continue to progress forward. And yes, absolutely. Have I pulled, complete training from people?
Sure.
Absolutely, I have.
Yeah, yeah.
But here again, that's where you have to open dialogue. And yeah, sometimes that dialogue is not well received. But I think that when you open a dialogue with a client and they understand that you truly have your number one, you are hearing them. You're not just speaking at them, but you're hearing them and you are making choices that you feel are in their best interest. And like you said, you have established yourself that you are an authority here and that you are trying to help them and that this is the trajectory that we do need to go. This is what to kind of expect. I think we have a little bit more buy-in that way, and we have that trust that we're, building.
Yeah, I always think it's kind of ironic when you hear the term get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But the irony in that statement is that may apply in a lot of cases. But for our population, the people that were kind of lumping into this, being uncomfortable isn't being hardcore and doing more and this and that. Being uncomfortable is doing less generally. And then guess what? You've swept their identity out from under them. And now, you're not so hardcore anymore.
Yeah.
What happened? Right?
Absolutely nailed it. Yeah.
That's been the most uncomfortable experience of my entire life, was doing less stuff. Just doing less stuff.
I remember when I first started myself, when I first actually came to Jason as a client, because I was in a prep and it was like the typical, right? I was doing all the cardio, eating all the less food to the gram, and yet my weight was going up. Like what the fuck? Like that is literally not possible, right? And I remember when he was like, hey, like we're going down to 2 training days. I did not know what to do with myself. Like I felt like, here again, like part of my identity was just taken away because I legitimately love that. To which I think that's part of the journey sometimes. As we've chatted, we don't want you to go back to where you were, but sometimes helping to help somebody find who they are, because most of the time they have wrapped up their identity into like this one thing and they don't have any other outside, resources. And here again, for many, whatever different reasons, but helping them to find joy and find happiness. Like I know you and I have talked about that like endlessly, like asking a client, like what actually makes you happy, and they don't know.
Right. Yeah. It's always a hard initial conversation, and there's resistance sometimes. There can be pushback. Sometimes sometimes that's the case where you might even lose a client occasionally. They fall off.
Yeah.
It happens. A lot of time they come back. And unfortunately, when they do come back, they're in a worse position than where we were at. But, it happens. And
the pain was not bad enough.
Yes,
that's what I would say.
it.
The pain was not bad enough. And you know what? That's part of the journey. I don't ever want it to be bad enough. I would rather, get it on the flip side, but.
Right. We try to prevent it getting bad enough, but it doesn't always work. It doesn't. And there's a lot of levels to that, of course. Like the tolerance of that pain comes in a lot of levels. There's
I think it's high with the population that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean,
like it is very high.
Yeah. I mean, there's cases where any person looking in from the outside would just be astounded at what these people are doing and continuing to complete task-wise on a regular basis. It's incredible. But the coolest thing, and I'll kind of close it out with this, is when you break through, and what happens to a lot of people when you do break through and when they become at peace with this, a lot of the time they never want to do what they did before.
Yes.
And that's the most,
Cool.
there's not one single moment in these cases that's better than that, because everything's downhill from there, or
Yeah.
uphill. Yeah, downhill, I guess would be
Yeah.
the term. Everything's downhill from there. I mean, it's competing's a great example. So like, I get these cases and I tell them, hey, competing may be off the table for you. It might not. I really have to see, like, I can't predict that necessarily. I try my best, but I can't always predict it. But a lot of the time when they get done, they're like, well, I certainly never want to do that ever again. And if you would have told them that 6 months ago, 12 months ago, 18 months ago, you would have gotten a completely different response. And I'm the same. I mean, there's things I still compete. I do things a lot differently. There's a lot of things like in my off seasons, in my daily life and stuff. I absolutely never want to do some of the things I did before, ever, and but until you hit that point, you don't heal. You don't.
Yeah.
That's where you have to get to heal, because before that, I mean, beyond that point, you're following the plan. Like you've seen this. They follow the plan, but it's just constant negativity and it's constantly, driving stress. It's like, great, I know you're adhering to the plan. I'm not telling you you're not adhering to the plan,
Not
but
into it.
you haven't, you haven't given me you've given me one positive update in the last 10.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
not bought in.
Yeah. That's what I've had to have that conversation with several clients where I say, you can take, you can eat all the right foods. You can follow, if we're doing like a meal plan, you can eat it to the whatever gram. You can take all the supplements at the same minute of every day. But if you have not changed your mindset, and if we are not, it truly, honestly, comes back to like finding happiness and some joy in your life. You're not going to get the outcome. Like, we'll never get there.
Never. And that's the truth. That's the harshest part of this, but it's true. And it's true in every single one of these cases. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how hard you try.
Yeah.
Until you get there, you won't heal.
Yeah. I think, like, it's the coolest moment is when
It's so cool. Amazing.
You have somebody and they are bought in, like, mentally, just the abundance is just so there. Everything is, if they have, and I'm not saying, we should probably caveat this. We are not saying that people wake up and like, it's like butterflies are, going, birds are chirping,
Right.
rainbows and starbursts. Like, no. It's just things start to just roll off of them. Like this happens in their day and they're like, that's okay. I laughed it off. They start taking things just a little bit lighter. Things are not so catastrophic, if that makes sense. And when they get through this moment and they start finding some joy and happiness, it's like literally you watch their eyes just like breathe for the first time, and they feel good, they feel strong. For females, they're having cycles again, and like you said, at that moment goals completely shift, because at that point they have a better relationship with food, they have thus a better relationship with perhaps family, and they're starting to make some more friends. And it's just such a cool place to be when they stop chasing the same things. And then we can say, hey, you know what? Like, do we want some body composition goals? Are we in the position to have that? And if they are, man, the road that we take to get there is so different. And I have so many clients now that we're just like to the gram of everything. And now we're having weeks where we might not track while they're traveling, and having untracked meals with no stress or no drama and no binge restrict cycles. They're able to just, hey, I had a meal, I ate till I was full, or hey, I overate this time, lesson learned, I'm not going to do that again. Like, really cool moments,
Yeah, those are the milestones. Those are the things that I really congratulate my clients on, and try to let them know how important it is, and tell them like, you understand what just happened.
Yeah.
It's big.
It's funny, is like, I don't think
It's
they
big.
do sometimes, because like for us,
Yeah.
we're just like, this is so
Yeah. No, it's because we've seen it, but yeah, it's huge. But cool. So it is mealtime. I am hungry.
I will not keep you. I know this
Uh,
could be a trauma.
yeah, I'm hungry and I have to pee. My bladder, I can't hold anything in. It's just like pee, pee, pee. Drink some water to stay full, then pee some more. But cool.
Awesome. Well, this was fun.
I
Thanks so
appreciate
much.
you having me on. I will repost as well.
Yay. I will then repost the repost.
Sweet. Sounds
Awesome.
good.
Okay. Thanks. Have a good one.
Have a great night.
Bye.
Bye bye.